Welcome to the Birthing Podcast. I am Kim, your host, and I have set out into the world to explore what daring to be sensitively wild in a world on fire can feel like. If you're here, it is probably because you too have been hearing the calling. A calling home to what it means to be human, interconnected, alive. A calling for change and responsible action in resonance with life. Let this podcast inspire you on your and our path into wholeness. If you want to set an intention, take a deep breath, pause, and let your inner verse speak. And when you're ready, let's dive in. Welcome to the Birthing Podcast. This was a very, very spontaneous decision. I literally went on my Substack page and wanted to post a Yoga Nidra, and then I ended up creating a podcast. This also marks the day that I decided to share my next step, my new becoming, with my surroundings, with the people that have been involved in anchoring me in this place where I live at the moment, and telling them that I am yet again unearthing, yet again birthing, and therefore moving places, moving countries, moving ways of being. And that is kind of the occasion. That's the energy that we are meeting right now. That's the energy that I'm inviting in as you sit down, as you listen, perhaps even close your eyes. So these explorations, these contemplations that we can explore in this podcast are, as always, invitations. Meaning that we will have space and time to embody, to explore and notice how whatever I'm inviting you into is rippling through you and perhaps even changing something along the way, transforming something along the way. This podcast holds the intention, it's really the energy with which it's being initiated right now, to dare and imagine, and then also dare and embody new ways of being, new old ways, remembered ways of being that are kind of, for me, it feels like it's a tingling sensation beneath the surface, beneath the numbing, beneath the overwhelm, the day-to-day life that just asks for attention. The more we turn inwards, the more we connect to our souls. And so the calling for this next chapter in my life is to truly and honestly embody what is wanting to change, no matter how scary, no matter how crazy it might seem. Perhaps you already saw it on my Instagram. There is a video that I shared on insanity, the word insanity. I think it really encapsulates how I feel right now, because I feel very sane. I feel very much attuned to my cycles, to the calling. And being in sanity is unfortunately perceived as being out of it, as being insane. So just a moment for you to let that sink in, to really look at the root of this very word and see how twisted we are, to have come to the conclusion that the very meaning of being in sanity is the opposite of it. So I will declare here now that I'm very happy to be insane. Yeah, so with this first episode, my intention is to let you know a little bit where I'm at, who I am, and where I want to take you with and what journey as it's unfolding. I'm Kim, Kim Joanna, and I've been on a quest of understanding or understanding my relationship with myself, with the world, so that we may find this place, our place in this interconnected web of life. And there have been moments in my life that definitely led me to where I am right now, that were key in becoming me. And I would love to share a few of those. One is that I'm half German, half Spanish, and at the age of 7, my family moved to Chile, to the capital, to Santiago. And I'm saying this because the social differences between Germany and Chile are very apparent. And for a 7-year-old, very difficult to name. So the person I am, started to feel inequalities, injustice in a very embodied way, which is very normal for especially young children, for babies. And at some point we unlearn it. But yeah, that for sure gave me a taste of what I now can name colonization, sexism, patriarchy, you name the big, big things. So with that feeling that something was wrong, but I could not yet name it due to my age, due to the lack of education I had, we then returned to Germany. And through my studies in politics, psychology, law, and economics, that definitely deepened, yet it only remained on a mental understanding. And still the disconnect between what I was learning, the content that I was consuming, and what I was actually experiencing and feeling, that discrepancy was tearing me apart. And that's when yoga, literal unity, came in and gave me a practice that allowed me to move that stuck energy through my body, through and around my body. And soon after, I learned about somatics. It's funny because yoga is somatics. For me, yoga is somatics. You dive into an intimate experience of how it is to be you in that moment. You practice presence with what is. You practice acceptance. You practice non-attachment. You practice all of these juicy, juicy things that are anchored in the yogic traditions and that are deeply part of my lineage of somatic practice. I then also realized that, and that might be a very controversial, but still, for me, very true experience. I experienced the yoga studios as containers that allow for a lot of transformation, especially for our day-to-day westernized life. And I experienced the deep sadness that came with packing all of this wisdom, this knowledge, into a 60-minute, 90-minute practice. It made me realize how separate our life, our day-to-day is. And that's kind of the transformation that was moving through me in the last year or so. This pain that comes from living in pockets. And what I mean by that is waking up in your own four walls, which, what a privilege, right? Living in your own four walls and having this very, very slight and sometimes super loud feeling of loneliness and isolation. And going about your day, not really giving it attention because there is something else, something next that has to happen. So you step out of your four walls, you have a meal, perhaps you're lucky and you're sharing it with someone, but most of us eat our meals with our phones in our hands. And from that pocket, you move on to your 9 to 5, or perhaps you're lucky and you have the privilege to do your work and find the purpose in whatever you're doing. And still, at some point, also this pocket, this container ends. And so you're at the mid or end of your day and are searching for yet another pocket, connecting with friends or following your hobbies for 1 or 2 hours, maybe a bit more, until you return back to your four walls. And perhaps there's still that nagging feeling of loneliness. And I can simply not do that anymore. It's the more I practiced yoga, the more I practiced being with what is, the louder that truth that this is not natural, this is not how at least I am supposed to live my life. And what this has to do with yoga studios is that I would experience these tiny or sometimes bigger transformations, but also the hustle that is stored in every single body that came and joined my classes. The wish to turn off the day-to-day, the things that happen just before, the things that might happen right after yoga class. And this is just not how it goes. This is not a place for disconnection. It's not a place to go deeper into separation and say that just for this 1 hour, for this one pocket that I have, I will practice that reconnection and then I'll go back into that hustle. Like, what? It just feels irrational to me. It feels irrational. It feels as if we're feeding the very thing that we're trying to step away from when we go and practice yoga. It feels like we're feeding separation by even just thinking that in an hour a day, and let's say an hour a week or every 2 weeks, we get those moments of bliss, and that's enough to keep the soul alive. And so I reached a moment of stagnation now in my teachings, in my yoga classes, where it just doesn't feel genuine and it doesn't feel fulfilling anymore to be serving this system in that way. And I have a little anecdote here that my teacher, Uma, shared once. She was asked, or some of her colleagues were asked, to give a 7-week kind of mental health training to one of the big firms, big corporations. And so they did. But what happened in week 5 is that the employees that were taking part were enjoying this practice so much that they were starting to awaken. They were starting to question what they were actually working for. They were starting to question their day-to-day life. And that is something that got really dangerous for the corporation itself, because people were considering quitting. That's what happens. That's what happens when we wake up. And so they stopped. They didn't allow the whole course to go through because damage control, like you want to get people to a certain mental health level where they can be efficient and still work in the machinery that that they were put into, but you don't want them to actually awaken into their truth. And so I kind of feel like that's where I'm at right now with yoga spaces. And I want to like clearly name here that we're in an age of transition. Our world, our systems as we know them, they're breaking. They're being torn apart from all directions. And in those transitions, we need places like yoga studios that have integrity and know where this journey is going, so that those who are working in this machinery, because that is how they can sustain themselves in this 3D world still, because there is no new world yet created for them to just step in. And that's for everyone. That's also for me. That's when yoga spaces are very sacred and very important places, like any other community places. So I'm just here to name that as well. I'm not saying that yoga studios are bad. I'm saying that they might serve a certain purpose, and to an extent they can actually fulfill that. And in my experience, in my opinion, there comes a moment where yoga studios become or are that bridge, and that stepping over that bridge into the new world might require another sort of medicine. Yeah. Wow, it feels very bold to say this, because I deeply, deeply appreciate every single studio owner that I have been working with, and every single studio that I stepped my foot into to teach, because it gave me a platform to convey my frequency and to connect with like-hearted people. So those spaces are necessary, and I am stepping into this new chapter. So perhaps you want to take a moment, notice where these words are landing, if there's something that's been resonating more or less. Damn, and I noticed that I could really just go on and on talking about the nuance and all of these things, and the complexity, the contradictions that humans and the world just hold. So let me say here as well that I am a contradiction. I benefit from this very system that I'm trying to step out of, and yet have it deeply, deeply internalized. And I hate it, and perhaps also hate those parts in myself for that. But hate is a really strong word, so I wouldn't say that. But yeah. And so I want you to also see how this next part, me sharing what my decision is, what my next steps are, how is that landing with you? Because it might trigger, some limiting beliefs, but also some opinions, and they're all welcome. I've been sitting with them, and I will keep sitting with them as we are all becoming. All right. I sat with the concept of white culture, white identity a few weeks ago, and as I sat with it, I'm not gonna lie, it was all caused by an Instagram video. As I sat with it, I tapped into a well of grief and loss for all the indigenous people of my land that have just been extinguished. Like, no trace of tradition, no trace of any elders that can still tell their stories. Or perhaps I should say, traces that are very difficult to find and that I really want to find myself. But yeah, this grief, this loss brought up a moment where I started to connect with my ancestors. I felt a deep humbling and also sadness, pain. It was tearing my heart open. And I felt really like wanting to just say sorry for having ignored my ancestry for so long and having appropriated cultures that were able to contain and maintain their traditions even in the face of genocide. And yeah, it made me realize that it was just always easier to look at the exotic, exciting cultures of Latin America, of Southeast Asia, of you name it, North America, to look at those bits and pieces, or Africa, like literally everywhere, except Europe. Oh, it's always been easier. Because there's this sort of fanatism that is in the spiritual realm, aka neocolonialism, that seeped through. So yeah, that day I made a commitment to retrace and go back to my ancestry and to find their ways of working with the land, of communicating with the land. And I know myself as an arts witch. I am not the herbal witch, but I am very much a witch that likes to create through all forms of being, whether it be song and voice and sound, or drawing on paper, or bigger movements, dance, touching the earth. So many forms of creation. So I was just waiting to hear that next calling of how it should look like, the reconnection with my ancestry. And that answer came really, really soon, very quickly, thanks to now a friend of mine. She works with earth and she paints with natural products, aka earth. I like to say aka. Anyways, and I was like, wow, that's the medium. It's so easy. It's just the elements. We don't need anything else. The elements are going to tell me because the elements are my ancestors. I am made of them. And so my ancestors, through the medium of earth and water, holy moly, water is such a storyteller. I will start to listen and hopefully also find like-hearted people that are on the same quest, elders that are somewhere hidden, somewhere ready for someone to come along and listen. More practically, this journey is taking me to the north of Spain. I remember when I was 14 or 15, I was out of nowhere super obsessed with wanting to learn the language of the Basque land. If you're not familiar with it, it's Euskera, Euskadi. I think Euskadi are the people, but Euskera, a language that has nothing to do with Spanish, developed in isolation to any other language in Europe, and has more similarities with Japanese than with anything else. From what I remember, my dad told me. My dad has a big brain, so yeah, I trust him with this one now. I was just fascinated, and when him and I went through that part of the country when I was 17, it just stuck with me how soaked the people are in their folklore and their tradition. And so that's the next place, the first place I will go to and see what awaits me there. I have a long-term vision of living in community. And that's where, for me, a lot of judgment comes up towards myself, towards that decision. Is it me running away from something? Is it me what was the word? Is it me escaping? And right now, at least, it really doesn't feel like it. It feels like I am ready to birth the new world in my way, and the way my body, my channel is asking me to do it. So I want to leave this first part of the podcast with this, that we all have our unique ways in this life to serve life. I'm not urging all of us to go and live in communities because that's the only way to bridge this intense transitioning time from the breaking system into a new world. And if there is something inside of you that has been yearning to be heard, because it has something to tell you about how you can live your life, how you can serve the world in a better way, then this podcast might be an inspiration for you to tap and attune to that voice. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying with this little unfolding of my journey so far and where it's taking me. I'm really curious where this podcast is gonna take us. For now, I leave it at this. If you feel like sharing, if you feel like commenting, I would love to connect. So, yeah. See you in the next one.